I'm Rick, and I'm building the Terminator. Today, I'm inserting the trigger mechanism. They're commonly called a trigger mechanism, but a better name would probably be a spear release mechanism. For this project, I decided to use a Neptonics tuner mechanism. They're simple, they're robust, and more importantly, I already had one sitting in a drawer. The mechanism comes also with a line release hook, which sticks out the side of the gun. Included in the package are these pins, which can be used to secure the mechanism and the line release hook into the stock. I'd routed the mechanism pocket previously. I'd used a 1/2-inch router bit. It fitted the archaic measurements that the mechanism came with. The pocket was deeper than the body of the mechanism, which you can see when you drop the mechanism in. This is to allow a bit of room, and it makes the fitting of the mechanism easier. I made sure there was nothing to foul the return spring for the trigger. The hole for the spear is neat, and there's not a lot of room on either side. A slight recess, routed just in front of the trigger pocket, gives a little wiggle room and makes it easy to get the spear in. I had to work at the right width of stock beside the trigger mechanism. I wanted to have the stock as wide as possible, but the line release hook needs to protrude. So I used a bandsaw to take off fillets from either side, leaving a stock of about 50 millimeters. The next step was to work out how deep to bury the spear release mechanism. I clicked the spear into the mechanism so that it was engaged, and then I dropped them both onto the top of the stock. So the spear sat at the bottom of the spear channel, and the mechanism was hanging into the mechanism pocket. And this is the right depth of bury for the trigger mechanism. I used the corner of the chisel to mark the height of the mech in the pocket. Then I laid it on the side of the stock at the marked height. I secured the mechanism to the body of the stock using a clamp. I clamped it down tight and proceeded to drill the first hole. I've made up several pins that I use when I'm fitting trigger mechanisms. They're the same thickness as the final pins will be. The ones laying down are 3/16 of an inch, and the one I'm holding is 1/8 of an inch. I dropped the pin in to make sure that it was registered exactly correctly, then reclamped, making sure all the time that the mechanism was positioned correctly on the side of the stock. Time for the second hole. I used 2 pins to dry fit the mech, then engaged the spear to check that everything fitted just right. And it clicked in nicely. I got one minor injury during the fit up. If you don't have blood on the build, you're not doing it right. The next step was to fit the line release hook. It fits in a slot on the side of the mech. So I measured it all up, the width and the length. I penciled the measurements onto the side of the stock. When the spear's left the mechanism and the line's released, the hook has to rotate forward. So you need a ramp in front of the slot where it sits, and this allows the hook to rotate. I marked the ramp's location in pencil 2. I found a router bit 3/16 of an inch wide. Put it in a trimmer and cut the slot. The ramp was a little more difficult. I had to use a round file to file at it, but I managed. I laid the hook on top and worked out the swivel point. An 1/8-inch drill made the hole for the swivel pin. Then it was a case of dry fitting it together just to see how everything worked. I used the 1/8 inch pin to hold in the line release hook. As it turned out this time, I hadn't quite made the ramp big enough or left quite enough room. So I finessed the slot with a saw. I now had a mechanism that, in the dry fit stage at least, worked, and the line release hook worked too. Time to move on to the next step, but that's the subject of another video.